the early hours of February 24th, 2022, as the first Russian rockets were fired into Ukraine, Maria Lysenko was in bed in the suburbs of Kyiv.
I was sleeping. In the morning, my sister came running with her little son. She knocked on the window and screamed, "Masha, it's war." I looked out the window and said, "Tanya, what are you talking about? What war?" I was in shock. At first, I thought she was joking. She said, "It's really war. Just go outside." People came out. Some had blood on their heads. Children, they were crying. Women were falling on their knees. Everyone was in shock when they fled from Kiev. Executions in Bucha, Irpin, this was really scary. Sirens, screaming, those rockets every night, tanks, explosions on the road. It was very scary.
Maria and her sister Tanya gathered up their children and ran for their lives, leaving their husbands behind to fight. They headed for Poland.
We left at 7 in the morning. We were at the border in 3 or 4 days. We crossed the border before midnight. First, ours, then the Polish.
Maria says her family was rescued at the Polish border by volunteers from the JCC, the Jewish Community Center in Krakow.
I was told that there was this organization and it would help us, and they gave me a place to live, took me under their wing, and are helping me to this day.
Maria ended up at the JCC headquarters in Krakow, where to this day hundreds of Ukrainian refugees line up every morning for supplies of free food, medicine, and even disposable diapers. Historically, there have been a lot of tensions between Ukrainians and Jews. Nobody was too sure how the small Jewish community here in Krakow would react to the massive influx of Ukrainian refugees. The outcome has been quite stunning.
This is the Jewish quarter of Krakow called Kazimierz, named after Kazimierz the Great, which is the only Polish king to be called the Great. And he was the one, about 500 years ago, who welcomed the Jews to Poland.
American Jonathan Ornstein is director of the Krakow JCC and effectively the general in charge of the massive relief effort mounted by the tiny Jewish community here.
We've helped well over 200,000 Ukrainian refugees. We're still helping about 1,000 a day. That's mostly women and children. And the absolute vast majority, probably 98% at least, of those that we've helped and continue to help are not Jewish. And we do this because this is the right thing to do. We do this also mindful of the fact that 80 years ago, when the Jews were the victims here, there wasn't too much help.
80 years ago, there was a thriving Jewish community in Krakow. It was wiped out by the Nazis in the Second World War. Many of the residents of this neighborhood ended up being murdered in the nearby Nazi death camp of Auschwitz-Birkenau. This group of elderly Krakow Jews were children who survived the Holocaust. They happened to be holding their monthly meeting at the community center when the food bank for Ukrainian refugees was being set up in the next room.
One of the survivors stood up, and she herself was a child in the Warsaw Ghetto and had been saved. And she looked across the hall, she pointed to the refugees and said, "That was us 80 years ago." And she said, "I propose that we take our annual dues, which I think are about $10 or $12 each, and we donate them to help Ukraine." And one by one, these elderly survivors put their hands up and voted to give their support to Ukraine.
Widzimy, że jeżeli się dzieje krzywda i możemy jakoś pomóc, no to pomagamy właśnie w taki sposób, jak można było.
Ta cała sytuacja przywołuje wspomnienia naszej sytuacji w czasie wojny, kiedy musieliśmy ukrywać nasze pochodzenie, kiedy drżeliśmy, żeby ktoś nas nie zadenuncjował.
My ten oddech wojny czujemy na plecach. Tak. No niestety.
To byśmy już tu może mieli Rosjan, my byśmy musieli ginąć.
I jest obolała, ale kazała.
Our response to the Ukrainian war, to the crisis, has been led by our Holocaust survivors who know more than anyone what it means to suffer and what it means to receive or not receive help at a time of crisis.
The Krakow JCC relief effort was documented from its early days by the longtime American news photographer Chuck Fishman. As multi-generational families poured in from all over Ukraine, the first requirement was food, and then a safe place for the children to sleep. There was cell phone battery power, so anxious mothers could contact home. There were shoes and boots provided in all sizes, and clothes for refugees who left home with nothing but the clothes on their backs. There was basic medical care and dental services. Classes were set up for kids until they could get into regular Polish schools. Eventually there were bicycles and even a summer camp experience. The JCC found hundreds of hotel rooms and apartments for refugees, and even rented this large palace 20 kilometers outside of Krakow, where 90 Ukrainian women and children have set up a community. Svetlana Savitska came here from Lviv, Ukraine, and now volunteers in the palace organizing community events. Her daughter is a psychologist who provides counseling to trauma victims. She is amazed that all this is provided by the Jewish community.
Ми тут святкуємо всі єврейські свята, католицькі, польські.
Here we celebrate all Jewish holidays, Catholic and our own. We are all united by humanity, decency, and mutual assistance, no matter what.
Не дивлячись ні на що.
We saw that we're housing and feeding them, but they have other needs. We need to get them into the workforce. So we started to teach them English. We started to teach them Polish. We started to help with job training. Many of them have gone through real trauma, separated from their families, sometimes things really awful, sexual violence. So we started to bring in counselors and to give them trauma treatment and legal support. We help them if they want to immigrate somewhere else, if they need to travel somewhere else.
Maria Lysenko has remained in Krakow, principally because she has a 12-year-old son who cannot hear or speak, and he has been enrolled in a special needs school here.
He studies at school. He's under stress. He wants to go home. It is difficult for him in a regular school, but there are other children like him.
Я думаю, що в генах тих людей залишився.
I think that pain remained in the genes of Jewish people. Such people cannot stay away from the pain of other nations. Only those who have experienced such a terrible misfortune can understand other people.
Інших людей. Це моя особиста думка. Я перепрошую.
I'm sorry, these are emotions. It's hard.
At the palace on the outskirts of Krakow, every Saturday there are piano lessons for young children. Some are learning to play songs in tribute to their Jewish hosts. Among the clients of the JCC are Marina Sokolova with her 1-year-old son Prokhor, who hopes to emigrate to Canada. The Holocaust survivor and philosopher Abraham Joshua Heschel said the opposite of good is not evil. The opposite of good is indifference. The ongoing plight of the millions of Ukrainian war refugees is a test of the humanity of the modern world. The Jewish Community Center in Krakow is passing that test.